Welcome back to the Wizard Shop. Today we're going to do some more fun things with Great Grandma. Yes, that's her name. We're going to bring her up to speed. Let's talk about how we're going to do that.
Come on, you guys are waiting on you, not the gym.
Well, that's about all this thing is worth anymore, this axle off of Great Grandma. It's scrap metal. It makes a great, I don't know, what do you call those, a dumbbell?
Free weights.
Free weights, whatever you want to call them. It is very heavy. Junior May actually pulled this thing out of the car with one arm. Guy's got super strength. I don't know how he does it. But this video today is going to talk about how we're bringing this thing up to the 21st century as far as being able to cruise on the highway without screaming its guts out. Literally like 55 miles an hour going, "Aah!" That's not going to work for very long. But not only am I going to gain more highway-friendly RPMs, there's things wrong with this original axle internally to the differential, and also one of the axle shafts is bent. I don't know how it got bent. But I've actually been reading on a forum. I'm a member of, I don't know if you call it a club or whatever, a forum called P15D24. And that is people that own these 1930s, 40s, 50s Plymouths. The common thing to do on these when you start having trouble with the axle is to ditch it. The reason being is when anything goes wrong with this axle differential, the price is so high. Let's take a look at it. So this is the original axle out of this 1954 Plymouth Savoy, and it is a ratio of 3.9 to 1, which is not terribly high, but it's pretty high when you don't have overdrive. And the tires are not very big either. So I mentioned in the previous video we had trouble with some wheel bearing noise, and although we did take care of most of it, there's still a growl going on inside of here. This is the differential. You can actually undo it with these bolts here and just pull that out. It's called the third member. A rebuild cost for that is extremely high. So there's two strikes against it here. There's something going on with the bearings, and number two, the gear ratio is really too high for today's driving. And the third strike, which means 3 strikes you're out, is over here. I'll take this drum off. Normally this drum is riveted. You can see the rivets that we cut to get to it to do some diagnosis. But I kept having issues with the brakes. Whenever I'd hit the brakes, the whole car would pulsate. It was like maybe the drums were out of round or something was really going on with the brakes, but it ended up not being the brakes at all. It's this actual shaft here is bent. It's kind of hard to show you right now, but on the car when it was still installed, we put it in first gear and let it run. You could see that this was wobbling like this. So that's also not good. 3 strikes and you're out. The main downfall of this old style axle is every time you need to buy a part, it's $300, $500, $1,000. It's just like really crazy expensive. They do make new drums for these. There's a company that makes brand new drums. They're actually very hard to find drums. $300 each. Now I did some searching on the P15D24 forum, and the common consensus is when you start having trouble with the axle on these old Plymouths, stop. You don't dump $1,500 into your axle. The cars aren't worth a whole lot compared to a 55 Chevy or something really collectible. So you don't dump 15 grand into these cars. You just don't do that. The consensus is dump the axle. Use it for lifting weights like I was. Do something with it, but don't use it on the car anymore. When I started adding up the cost of an axle, a rebuild on the differential, which I don't do in-house, I don't have all the different tools and shims and stuff, it got to be really expensive. But after reading on the P15 D24 form, I saw what kind of axle can you use, or what are the options here? Let's go to the back of Great Grandma and take a look. This is the answer to all our problems, according to a lot of the forum posts that I've read, and a lot of people have done this. This axle came out of a 92 Ford Explorer. It still has the drum brakes on it, which matches the front drum brakes. I don't really want to do disc brake conversion on this. The old axle being a 3.9 ratio, my RPMs at 55 or 60 were approaching 3,500, maybe even 4. And that's really the red line of this old technology engine, the Flathead 6. It can't do 5 or 6 grand RPMs. It will literally throw a rod through the block. So you have to get the RPMs down either through an overdrive transmission or a re-gear on the rear end. Being that I was having so much trouble with the old rear end, this made sense right here. This one is, according to this tag, 327, 3.27. That's going to give me much, much better RPMs. I imagine at 55 or 60 miles an hour, I'll be down to 2,500. I'll be able to do 70, probably. The RPMs will still be a little high, but 60 to 65 will be way more comfortable, totally doable. Now, the only things we had to alter are just a couple items. That's why people on the forums recommended to do this particular swap with this axle with the Ford Explorer, because the spring purchase, we just had to move them just a tiny bit. One thing I decided to do was cut the old purchase off, even though they were pretty close, and weld on the original purchase off the old axle. It uses the shock mount, the stock shock mount. Measured everything up, make sure it was all level, and it fell right into the pin perfectly. Junior Mint did the welding. It's not the best in the world, but it's very strong. It's got double welds here. It's not going to break. So as you can see from this shock mount up to those two holes up there, it will all line up perfectly. When we set the axle onto the springs, we were concerned it wouldn't line up or we were going to have issues, but it fell right onto these little divot pins or whatever you want to call them. It just set right on there perfectly. So I was very happy with that. The width of this axle is within a quarter or half an inch of the old axle. This was very easy to do here. But one thing we are noticing is with the exhaust. Let's go ahead and get a different angle. One thing I ran into is when the weight of this vehicle is placed back onto the axle, it actually will contact the exhaust, which wasn't a problem with the old axle. So what I'll do is I'll remove the rusty rotten part. It was not very good anyway. I'll take it over to the local muffler shop and have them put a new piece on for me. Shouldn't be but probably $100 or less, and we'll take care of that problem. As you can see, we have drum brakes. I'm going to grab one of the wheels and show you guys something. So one of the issues I was kind of worried about is, are the wheels, the original wheels, going to mount to this Ford Explorer axle? But based on what I read on the forums, they will. Let's try it out. Wow. 1954 Plymouth wheels on a 1992 Ford Explorer axle. Perfect. You can even see on the concentric inner hole, it fits perfectly. Very, very good. This one will be about a 1/4 inch wider on each side, but luckily it's not going to rub or hit anything, so I'm very, very happy about that. Another thing I was concerned about is this drive shaft has a very strange, almost like a CV shaft on it. It moves in and out, sideways and up and down. And it's just like a flange mount. And most axles of this era in the 90s have a U-joint, a standard U-joint like we would think of, a yoke. But when the axle arrived, it had this flange also. I was very happy. All I'll have to do is make a very thin round adapter between these two, drill some holes in the flange, thread the holes. I'll probably put an aluminum spacer here, and boom. That's it. So we have our U-bolts will line up and bolt up. Our drive shaft will bolt up. Our shocks will bolt up. The next thing we're going to have to look into is the brake lines. Let's take a look at that. So this is the original flex hose that goes to this car. It's actually in very good shape. It's been replaced fairly recently. So I'm going to reuse it, but it went right here. 2 bolt holes, there's the line. So that's no problem. Then over here, this little block, we're going to have to hope that we can bolt this to the axle and these will thread in. Let's try it. Oh my goodness, guys, it doesn't get any better than that. So I can bolt this to the axle. It uses the original 54 Plymouth flex hose right here. And both of these lines will bolt up perfectly. Amazing. I'm very excited about that. One of the options, if you're not going to do an axle swap or a rear end swap, is to take the direct drive transmission 3-speed out, and they have an R10 overdrive transmission that can go in place of this. It's pretty much a direct bolt up, but where you used to be able to find those for 500 bucks, 400 bucks, they're now 2,000 bucks. I actually posted this onto the forum that I'm talking about, and the people were like, this is nuts. How did it get so high? But I guess because they're getting rarer and rarer. So based on the price, that really wasn't something I wanted to do. The transmission shifts beautiful. There's nothing wrong with it. The clutch is good. But as you can see, it does have some leaks. This is the parking brake right here. And it's kind of grungy.
Definitely slimy.
So we'll have to take this drive shaft off, take the output flange off, and reseal that. And then right here where the shifter arms are located, there's some seals that are going to need to be replaced there as well. So we'll get the seals taken care of, the oil leaks taken care of. The transmission shouldn't need anything else than that, maybe a service.
Okay, well, Car Wizard, but most people, if they're trying to get better, speed on the highway, don't replace the whole axle. They just put new gears in the rear end. Why didn't you do that?
The reason behind it is because it's very difficult to find that specific differential, and if you do, it's not going to be 50 bucks. It's going to be 500 bucks or 800 bucks. It's going to be really expensive. There we arrive again at the fact that everything on the old axle is so expensive, it's just not worth it. Here's the kicker, guys. I found that Ford Explorer axle on eBay, delivered to my door for 300 bucks. I didn't even have to go get it. I clicked the purchase button, out of sight, out of mind. I didn't even have to think about it. A week later, there's a delivery truck, a freight truck showed up for 300 bucks. And then here's another kicker. The brake drums aren't $300 each, they're $30 each. The brake shoes aren't $100 per side, they're $15 per side. So now I have way better cruising RPMs, much cheaper maintenance, and if anything goes wrong, there's hundreds of thousands of Ford Explorer parts out there. Any of these old cars, if you want to keep them today, there's 2 ways that you do it. You put it in a museum and you do not drive it, and you just leave it stock. If you want to get it on the road, take it to car shows. You don't want to be stuck at 45 miles an hour for your entire 5-hour trip. So you do overdrive transmissions. A lot of these old hot rods, 30s and 40s hot rods, if you look underneath, they don't have stock transmissions. They have a T5 with overdrive, or they've done different swaps and things so that it's more manageable and usable on the highway. That's all I'm doing here. So I'll gain probably fuel mileage, easier on the engine, and parts will literally be 80% or more cheaper to maintain on the rear end. So that's why I did this. Normally I would think this car is only 30,000 miles on it. It's all original. It's in such good shape. Who in the world would put a Ford Explorer axle? But after reading all over the internet, and especially on the forum I just mentioned, a lot of people have done that. So I'm next in line. I'm doing it too. Do I feel guilty about modifying such a pristine car? No, because I've given it a new lease on life. Now I can take it home and take the highway home, do 65 comfortably and easily, and not be stressing the engine so bad that possibly damage it. There's stories I've read about people taking these and trying to do 70, 75 miles an hour with the original drivetrain, and after an hour, they literally, like I said, they throw a rod through the block. These engines cannot do that. And now they won't have to. So the reason why this one, the old one, was bent at the axle, I don't know. We did replace some parts on the other side, but once we started to try and work on this side, we saw that it was bent, and we just stopped. Maybe they hit something so hard that it bent it, or I don't know. I don't know the reason behind it. But I know that I'm not putting any more money into the old axle. If somebody wants to buy it, it will be for sale. You can contact Crazy D in the office, but I'm not going to be using it. So I'm glad you guys could join us on Antique Row. We've got all the old cars in the back here, including Great Grandma. The name Great Grandma was given to it by Junior Mint, and I was like, where in the world did you get Great Grandma from? He said 1954 is so far and beyond anything I can ever remember, way before I was existed. It has to, he's like, as old as hell. It has to be a great grandma. I was like, okay. To me, that's not that old. That is a great grandma to me. But to him, this is a great grandma. So just a kind of a viewpoint of when you were born. I suppose that one's great grandma now? I don't know. But if you're curious what kind of tools we use to do this axle swap, check my Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We get a small cut. We really appreciate it. And make sure to hit the subscribe button, because every day there's some kind of project or another car that rolled in and more videos to come. Thanks for watching.